Good evening and welcome back to Capital Times. Statewide look at politics. I'm Tim Boyum. It's Wednesday, time for the advocates, the folks whose job it is to research the topics we talk about each and every night. This week we're joined by Ellen Fryer, who heads up the Workers' Rights Project over at the Progressive North Carolina Justice Center, and Donald Bryson, who heads up North Carolina's chapter of the Conservative Americans for Prosperity. Both promoted recently, so congratulations to both of you.
Thank you.
Good to hear.
All right, so Kay Hagan's trying to bring the minimum wage debate back into this race quite a bit. It's $7.25. There's been proposals to bring it up to $10.10 an hour. Alan, you've been a long proponent of raising the minimum wage. To give us the short argument of why it's so important.
Absolutely. We can all agree that we need an economy that works for everyone. We can all agree that work needs to pay for every single worker, particularly those trying to support their families and make ends meet. And what we find is that the current minimum wage simply just doesn't do that. Currently, 80% of the jobs that were created in the state since the end of the recession don't pay enough to make ends meet. And the minimum wage is really an important tool for getting families out of that difficult place of not being able to pay enough for groceries, medicine, health care. And so it's good for workers. We also think it's good for the economy. When workers earn more money, they're able to buy more goods. That supports local businesses in a very positive way. And ultimately, it creates long-term, robust economic growth. And so that's why we think raising the minimum wage is a really good idea.
Donald, the argument against it?
It prematurely increases in inflation of the economy. Minimum wage is supposed to help increase buying power for low-income workers. The problem is that when you increase the minimum wage, then you also increase the goods for those products that everyone uses, and so you're actually decreasing the buying power for those low-income workers, and you're perpetuating job losses that are already being exacerbated by the Affordable Care Act. People's hours are already being cut back. You're hearing the term 29ers, people being cut back to 29 hours a week, and now, if we increase the minimum wage, people are saying they will, in fact, have to dump off workers to keep costs down, and not only are hours going to be cut, jobs are going to be cut.
So we hear these arguments on both sides from economists, premier economists across the world. And I've asked you this before. How do we sort through this?
Well, I think we can just look at the facts, the basic evidence, right? Every time the nation has increased the minimum wage, there's been robust long-term economic growth immediately following it. Certainly the greatest periods of prosperity in American history were created when the minimum wage was the highest as a percentage of the share of the total economy. So we know from American history that this works. And I think what's also clear is that we are in a time when the times demand that we do something for low-income workers. Certainly with the problems in our macro economy, the large-scale economy, is folks just don't have enough money to support local businesses. Businesses need to be able to make profits, to increase their sales. And without purchasing power, they're just not. Without their consumers having increased purchasing power, they're just not able to do that. We're certainly at a time when inflation is not really a core problem we're facing. If anything, most economists think we have not enough inflation. We have a problem with deflation. And so really this is about putting money back in the pockets of regular working people who know what they need to do and know how to spend their money and help local businesses in the process.
How do you think we sort through it?
Well, I think that the way to help local businesses is not to force them to pay their employees more than what they're willing to pay them. Currently young workers are going to be the ones who would mostly benefit from an increased minimum wage, but their employment levels are currently at the lowest since we started keeping track of them back in 1948. So if parents are concerned about getting their kids that are back from college out of the house, increasing the minimum wage is not to do it. I think what we need to do is decrease regulations on businesses and lower some corporate taxes to help increase more people actually getting into the job market and not worry about fluctuating the economy based on the minimum wage.
During the debate, this came up, and Tom Tillis made a point that we shouldn't aspire to be dealing with a minimum wage economy, that we should be aspiring to do much more than that. We should be so focused on it. What do you say to that?
This is one area in which I would agree with Speaker Tillis. We don't want a minimum wage economy. Unfortunately, what North Carolina is living with is an economy that, in the period in which he has presided as Speaker of the House, the overwhelming majority of the jobs created here in North Carolina have been below or have been around the minimum wage level. They don't pay enough to make ends meet. And so what we would say is that clearly the policies of reducing regulations, cutting taxes, these haven't helped wages increase. If anything, wages have gone down since the end of the recession. And that's It's just moving the economy in the wrong direction.
We've seen polls that say that the general public supports minimum wage. I mean, people could argue that that's a question of course they would like it, but they don't understand the complex problem. What do you think about these polls that say most people do support the minimum wage?
I think it's too complicated of a subject to try to poll. Would you like more money in your paycheck? Sure. Okay, what if that increases the cost of your milk, the cost of the Band-Aid you buy for your child, the cost of the medicine you're going to buy your child, which it will, because workers who produce those things are going to be impacted by an increase in minimum wage. When you start putting it in that context, people start changing their mind on this pretty quickly.
So North Carolina typically has followed the path of the federal government, right? So we increase ours when the federal government has. So is it tough to somehow get on any one politician about this issue when that's just basically what North Carolina has done?
Well, I think what's exciting, actually, is that we're seeing a lot of local energy around increasing the minimum wage to what's called the living wage level, which is slightly higher than the minimum wage. The legislature tried to ban local governments from enacting local ordinances, but where there's a lot of engagement for local folks is getting the ball rolling again with local governments paying public employees, and in certain cases they can still force contractors to pay a living wage. And so while the legislature isn't doing anything, and while Washington, of course, is stuck in its usual morass, we are seeing a lot of energy in places like Greensboro and Durham and Charlotte, and this is exciting. It's very exciting that folks recognize that this is something that can meaningfully change their lives. And so regardless of what happens with the actual issue, these are folks who are getting involved in the democratic process, and that's a very positive thing.
Well, we talked so much about this and disagreeing with that. Unfortunately, we're out of time to talk about incentives where you guys would have actually agreed. So we'll have to bring you back next time to talk about that issue. In the meantime, Donald and Alan, good to see you both. Thank you.
Thank you.